So good afternoon, all the students present for this session, and welcome to the third block, Unit 7, where we are going to discuss the different aspects that we need to evaluate before entering into the international market itself. So, what are the risks that are associated with the process of internationalization? So, and beyond that, what sort of evaluations we need to carry out to, or before that, whatever we have discussed in our the thorough process of internationalization, the step by step methods that the organizations need to adopt when they go for domestic level of their operations to international level of operations. Like we have understood the basic steps, like how these organizations do create a strong field in their domestic level, then they adopt the method of exports, and then they carry out their ventures in the international organizations, expanding to the creation of the manufacturing processes and other facilities at the international level of organizations. So in this process, if we do have a clear understanding that internationalization or going beyond the domestic territory is not an easy process. You have to follow so many things. You have to go for a systematic approach to the internationalization process. And during that, we also had a discussion how this age of internationalization do vary in terms of different aspects itself. Now, before moving to the core aspects of today's discussion, that is to evaluate the risks and the markets of the host country itself, let's have some basic myths that the organizations or the people do have related to globalization. Now, the first such thing people do have is most of the people do believe that internationalization is equivalent to globalization. No matter difference. As I told you that the process of going beyond the domestic territory to the international markets takes different steps, and particularly when we collaborate all of those things, we arrive at two particular dimensions. One is the local responsiveness and the global efficiency. So we need to accomplish the efficiency at the global level. It's okay, but at the same time, we cannot ignore the local aspects like the local culture, local political system, local social systems, and local value systems itself of the host country itself. Now, going beyond that, as if we have discussed, and we'll discuss that also, right? The first step is to expand for the internationalization process, where organizations do take nearby countries which do have similar sort of culture, which do have similar sort of social, environmental factors, and where they do replicate their business. So that's the first phase, right? So here, the focus is not on the global efficiency or on the local responsiveness. So carry out organizations do carry out their business as a replication of their domestic level only. Now, from internationalization, they expand to multinational organizations, right, where they do pick up other countries, and the business in the other countries are treated as independent units. So the focus is given on the local responsiveness itself. And then the organizations go for the transnational organizations. The transnational organization is an organization where it is truly focusing on the global efficiency, means doing everything in a similar way across the organizations, and at the same time the focus is given on local responsiveness. But the true meaning of globalization is where we are not concerning, we are not focusing on local responsiveness, rather the policies, plans, rules, regulations, whatever we do have, that has got equal applications across the organizations, across the globe itself. So internationalization is globalization is a method. Yeah. Similarly, globalization, or whenever we do talk of these global strategies, most of the time we do have an assumption that global strategies is doing everything in a similar way everywhere. It cannot be possible because different people do have different sort of cultural values, political values, no, social values itself. So the kind of practice that I do have may not be successful in the host country. That means what? The culture of the parent country or the domestic country and the culture of the host country may differ significantly. So I have to take care of those minor, even if it is a minor, like we'll talk of. Now, considering simply the body languages itself, the way you handshake with the other person whenever you are going for a business deal, the way you exchange gifts, the way you look at other people, eh, everything has different meaning in different cultures. So before entering into a new market, we need to be very careful. We need to access the culture, the traditions, the customs, the values of the host country itself. Then we need to modify our processes. So globalization doesn't mean, sometimes it happens that exactly we do translate the vision of the organization or the mission of the organization, or say for ad campaigns in local languages. But it has been observed that the exact translation into these local languages gives a completely different meaning to that. So it's not doing the same thing everywhere. You have to be very careful for that. Globalization says it's a stateless corporation, right? No national, no community ties, and all those things. In fact, this is a myth. Even if we do say that we are operating in a liberalized economy where like all those kind of hurdles, barriers for carrying out the business across the globe has been withdrawn, but still, whenever we are like reaching out to the host country itself, the host country's political system is what that defines the kind of operations that can be done in the host country itself. We have to give respect to the local laws, enactments, right? So it's, even if we do say that we do have an open market, but that doesn't mean that we will have our monopolies. We have to take the local aspects. Globalization requires abandoning the country's image and values. This is a myth. In fact, it's okay that we are moving from domestic level of organizations to the international level of organization. But whenever we move to the host country, that doesn't mean that we will completely adopt the culture of the host country, losing our own identity or own culture itself. Okay? So wherever we move, we need to make that culture of the domestic country intact with the business process itself. So it's not about doing the business in a completely different way. Okay, we need to respect the culture of the host country, but at the same time, the culture of the parent country should not be ignored. Right? So we do have our own identity, and then we adopt the culture of the host country itself. Globalization is tackling on acquisitions or alliances in other countries without much integration or change. And that cannot be possible. As if we have understood in our previous module that integrations in terms of vertical integrations or horizontal integrations require so many changes in the organizational practice. Whenever we are venturing into the organizations or venturing into the kind of partnership with the host country organizations, what we do is that we exchange some resources, physical resources, right? May it be technological resources at one side and the market resources at the other side. So what is required is we have to modify the processes as per the requirement of or as per the agreements made for this particular kind of venture. So whatever I do in the domestic level of organizations, whenever I do go for a kind of merger, or I do go for acquisition of an organization in the host country, I cannot impose my rules, regulations, policies, plans, guidelines over there. I have to respect the local culture. So whatever policies, plans, rules, regulations the taken over organization has, a bit of modification may be there, but not a revolutionized approach. That is what we need to say, right? And globalization is a strategy that must involve sales and operations in other country. It's okay, like whenever we are going for an expansion, and in particular we are going for mergers, acquisitions, buybacks, right, or venturing into a kind of partnership with other organizations. The preliminary stage, we do have a target of capturing the host country's market, host countries, market niche, market segment. But that is not the sole objective of globalization. Globalization is a process where I completely, decentralize the process to the host country itself and make that organization, or my subsidiary organization, completely independent of their operations. So that cannot be possible over the night, but through a sequential approach, through a systematic approach, we can achieve that objective. So it's not that we are talking of carrying out these globalizations in different ways altogether. We are talking of this globalization as a systematic approach, a step-by-step method of the movement of the organization from the domestic level to the international level. So globalization doesn't mean that we will carry out the similar sort of businesses everywhere in the organization practice. So based on that itself, whenever we are talking of this globalization, let's classify all these organizations which are into the process of globalizations into four such important segments. And as I said, that these segments are based on two dimensions. One is local responsiveness, the second one is global efficiency. Right? So sometimes we do come out with a statement like, think globally but act locally. The statement signifies that, globalization is a kind of practice that we can have, similar sort of implications across the globe. Means what? Whatever we do have, say we do have a particular policy, plan, rules, regulations, that will be equally implemented across the organizations, across the globe. So there has to be uniformity in that. So global efficiency reflects that. But at the same time, when we do talk of this local responsiveness, each and every host country has got its own culture that cannot be undermined. We have to pay respect to the local culture of the host country itself. Because wherever I do carry out my operations, right, I have to deal with the people now. And whenever I do have these people do have their own cultures, their own things. That is what we need to respect. So based on that, as you can see in this particular diagram itself, when I do have low local responsiveness, low global efficiency, this is the first stage of the internationalization process. We call those kind of organizations as international organizations. This is what when happens when a particular organization is successful in the domestic market, right, and would like to expand beyond the domestic territory. They search for organizations where they do have similar sort of cultural values, similar sort of environmental, social values, similar sort of human values. So at the first phase, what they do is that they just make a replication of their business in the international organizations. So whatever they were doing at the domestic level, they don't make any kind of changes in that and they just make a replication of that in the international organization, in the other countries itself. And this process is what we call it as the ethnocentric approach of the organization, where the organization simply implement all those kind of rules, regulations, policy plans, whatever, all those strategies, what has made them successful in the domestic market in the international organizations. It's okay. We can think of this as the, as it is a first such movement of the organization from domestic territory to the international level. So they completely rely on their domestic practices. Here in ethnocentric approach, what it happens now, it cannot rely on the people, it cannot rely on the human resources of the host countries itself. So what it happens, a complete set of people, group of people are deputed to establish the business at the international level. So they are called as patriots, right? So a set of people are being deputed for that, right? And then when we do talk of the second phase, where organizations to expand to the countries where they do have similarities, not much of cultural differences, not much of value-based differences, right? So, we understand that each and every economy, they do have their own characteristics. If I'm talking of European economy, all the countries belonging to European economy may share some of the commonalities. If I do refer to Southeast Asian economy, all the countries belonging to Southeast Asia do have certain commonalities. So in the second phase, when I move from international market to the multinational market, right? So there, I establish the business somehow as an independent unit, having a control over the parent country, control with the parent country, control with the head office at the parent country itself. All those reporting relationships are done from the host country to the parent country itself. But because we do not find the exact similarities in terms of culture or value systems, so here in multinational organizations, the organizations adopt a polycentric approach. Polycentric approach is maybe we need to depend on the local resources of the host country, starting from the human resources to all other resources. So here what it happens, entire, because maybe the sales and promotional activities or made with expanding into that new market where the cultural differences has to be minimized, and that can be minimized only if I do have local authorities, local people, right, associated with me for carrying out my objectives. So completely relying on the host country nationals. But as I said, there has to be a reporting relationship where the host country nationals need to report on a periodic basis, on a regular basis to the host country, to the home country, parent country headquarters. That is multinational, having bit of differences, and the units are treated as independent units. Then when we move to the third level, that is global organizations. As you can see, in global organizations, the global efficiency is high, ignoring the local responsiveness. That means what? I need to come out with such practices, such facilities, which will go beyond the local complexities or local coordination mechanism. That means what? Here you need to talk of these global organizations are the organizations who carry out their functions in a similar way everywhere. But it is very, very, very difficult for an organization to really gain the experience as a global organization. But we do talk of this transnational organizations. Transnational organizations are the organizations where they do have high global efficiency. At the same time, the local responsiveness is also taken care of. So, in a sense, we can say that is actually these transnational organizations are the organizations which goes beyond the traditional practices where we do talk of uh, focus or the thrust given on local administration, but with a value which is based on the global efficiency. That's what we come out with. No, think globally but act locally. That means what our mindset should be. Our vision is to treat ourselves as a global organization, but at the same time, I need to take care of the local things. It's cultural values, traditional values, everything, right? So this is how these organizations do actually move from domestic level to define themselves as the global level of organizations. But as I say, it is not that easy process. The entire movement is not easy, right? So what we need to have is a proper assessment of the market or the risks associated with the organizations in their journey, and that will help the organization to overcome all those kind of barriers that they may face in due course of time. To address those, most common risks in international business is associated with three main factors. One is the political risk, second one is the financial risk, and third one is the economic risks. And out of this, the major or the significant thrust goes to the risk that the organizations may have because of the unstable political environment of the host country. So that is where it has been observed that a country which is politically stable has a positive attitude towards multinational organizations, right? They do have certain policies plans which is conducive for MNCs to carry out their operations. But where this political instability is there, and different political parties, they do have different philosophies. They do have their attitude towards different things, right? So what is required? MNCs would like to have a stable government, right? But they can carry out their operations. If there's a change in government, it will lead to a change in policies, plans, rules, regulations. Maybe. Sometimes it is also witnessed that organizations, MNCs in particular, are being taken as something having a favorable condition by a political party or as an unfavorable situation for other political parties, right? So that is what we need to understand, right? Even if we do say that the entire globe is liberalized now, we do have these WTO, World Trade Organizations, right? They do have this commitment of member nations towards a free trade, right? But still, you need to take certain other aspects. Most of the time, the local government, I'm talking of the host country government, do take a protectionism approach. Right? Like, as we have understood in our previous section, that this internationalization process leads to economies of scale, so large scale production, cost cutting, larger profit, reduction of cost, reduction of cost of capital, all those kind of advantages are there. So when given a chance to operate in the local level, right, these MNCs do always create a threat to the local entrepreneurs. And to protect the local entrepreneurs, government adds certain restrictions in terms of carrying out their business itself. Right? So restrictions are imposed in terms of foreign trade, in terms of this international itself, just to protect the countries or local entrepreneurs of the host country itself. Like most of the time, these restrictions are imposed on this import export license kind of thing. We're talking of this custom duties, laws regulating this. Domestic organizations. Domestic organizations deals with domestic currency, so they do not have a factor of risk when dealing with domestic currency. But when the same organizations move to international level, now they deal with the foreign exchanges, right? And actually, there is a risk involved because of the fluctuations in the exchange rates, right? So the price of the commodities may vary. The price of the production processes or all those expenses that will add different cost to the entire process. Right? So beyond that, if we to talk of this, risks itself, whenever you are going for an agreement of agreement with any kind of vendor for the supply of goods or or supply of raw materials of any such kind of thing itself, what it happens you have to ensure that the goods and the raw materials are supplied to you in time. The third point, what has been mentioned over here, that economic risk, timely delivery of these raw materials or any such product itself. We'll come to that, right? But most of the time, because of these fluctuations in the exchange prices itself, the suppliers, vendors do not supply the raw materials or the resources in time. Right? So that may lead the MNCs to add more cost to that. Right? So what is required is that whenever you are going for venturing into it, like you are going for vertical integration or horizontal integration with the organizations of the host countries, then to have the assurance, commitment of those organizations that they are going to make all the payments as per the agreed terms and conditions, as per the agreement itself. So that payment has to be taken into consideration, right? Otherwise, that will lead to many such different kind of problems for the organizations. Okay. We're talking of this economic risks, as we have understood. One of the aspect is that there has to be a timely supply of goods and services, whatever it may be, whatever is agreed for. If these goods and services will not be available at time, then that will lead to add cost to the organization. Cost of the production can increase, right? So increasing cost of production means lowering the profit margin itself. So that may lead to different kind of problems also altogether, right? So what is required is that you need to have the right agreement with the vendors of the host country that they should abide by the terms and conditions as mentioned in the agreement itself. Beyond that, sometimes we do have this geographical and economic conditions of the country as a matter of risk, right? Now, government, from time to time, they do have a protectional approach. It's okay, but government government of the host country would like to, develop certain areas, certain geographical locations, right? And that is the reason why they allow these MNCs to start their operations in those kind of areas. Now, most of the time, these geographic locations are isolated, right? Are completely rural, where the basic infrastructure facilities are hardly available. So there, MNCs need to develop if they are really keen in developing their business over there. So they need to develop their own infrastructure, own resources, and those kind of things. So the thrust is on the infrastructure development. Right? The thrust is on the economic plan of the particular host country itself. Thrust is on the population, the people dimensions, how we can engage the localites in that particular area. The thrust is on the per capita income, enhancing the per capita income of the organization, right? So all of those factors can actually put a severe threat on these MNCs to carry out their business in the host country itself. It's okay. We do talk of that. But even if we are talking of this political, financial, economic risks, how we need to make an assessment of these risks. Risk assessment is one of the most important process, most important things that we need to talk about. So here, this risk assessment process actually is based on two dimensions. At one point of time, I need to talk of assessing the risk associated with the host country itself, and the second kind of risk that I may have is the risk associated with my investment, the investment that I make. Now, we have understood that whenever we are going for the internationalization process, the expansion of business in different countries do provide us different sort of opportunities, but at the same time, there are many different threats, risks that is there with the internationalization process. So I need to have a thorough examination of all of those factors before taking a call on the internationalization process itself. So coming to this assessing the risk associated with the host country itself, and as we have understood that one of the major risks associated with the host country is the political stability or political instability. That is what we need to make an assessment. Most of the MNCs, they do have, they take this conducive political environment of the host country for the growth and development of their business itself. But what happens if there is political instability? How should I ensure that? So before moving into any such internationalization process, I need to have a thorough examination of the host country's political environment. How can I do that? I need to gather particular information related to the host country's political environment. How can I do that? I can do that through the various. So before moving, national and international media houses coming out with their own reports related to the political environment of the particular host country itself, right? So that is what we need to understand. Like these media houses, they frequently come out with their own reports. I need to collect all those things to understand the political scenario of a particular host country. Or I can also think of the evaluation of the host country's political scenario in terms of diplomatic assessments, right? So diplomatic things can be there itself, right? And somewhere or other, there are professional agencies who do these assessments on behalf of the international organizations. They make these assessments. Right? What sort of assessments? Like they take the political system, social system, cultural system, and like that, many such other factors. And they're evaluated by assigning random weights. At the end, these weights are jotted down to finally come up with the requirement of that particular rating system. Right? So factorizing all of those things are one of the aspects of the organization, right? But here we need to understand, most of the time it has been observed that these Western countries, which are more into the manufacturing process itself, these Western countries move closer to their consumers, move closer to the their associates itself. That is what we need to understand, right? So in that case, what it happens? These Western countries, which gives more thrust on the manufacturing processes, carry lower amount of risk, right? So it will, whenever we move, we need to evaluate in this line also. We are thinking of the low income group, level of countries, host countries. So definitely, as I know, the countries where there's a thrust on the manufacturing process do carry less risk as compared to the organizations which do have lower income group itself. But in between, if I do talk of a particular level of host country where it is based on middle level of income of the people itself, so there is always a probability of a political turmoil. There is always a probability of political instability, right? So whenever I do evaluate that, I do say that I should go for the countries where the thrust is on the manufacturing processes, right? So anything related to this middle income, host country organizations, right? That bears the highest level of risk. We can think in that way, right? That's right. Now, beyond this, we are talking of assessing this investment risk itself. Investment risk is key, the amount that I'm going to invest in the host country itself, whether I'll be able to recover that particular amount or not, right? So it is basically dependent on the kind of attitude that the host country government does have towards the MNCs itself, right? And the attitude of the host country government towards the parent country, the domestic country itself, right? Reason being, it is the attitude that will define that is based on the bilateral transactions, the kind of relationships these two countries do have. Right? So So what are the things like you're talking about? The tax structures, industry standards, government discrimination, ownership, management, right? Repatriation conditions, export obligations, and this local constraints itself. All of those local constraints, all of those are the things that are to be properly evaluated whenever we are going for a risk assessment itself. And as we understand that, it has to continue with a proper systematic approach itself. And I cannot take a arbitrary call. I cannot take an arbitrary decision on the basis of that. Right? That is what we need to understand. But okay, risk assessment is what we have done. But actually, what are the causes of risk? That is what we need to understand, right? Most of the time, it is confined to these 6 points itself, with the first such reason of risk is this economic objectives, right? So different sort of economic objectives are there, like and these MNCs would like to maximize their profit, but local governments would like to have a share from that. MNCs would like to expand, venture into new market niches, but local governments would like to gain in terms of technological advancements, technical know-hows, right? So I think we can see that these MNCs and the local government itself, the host country government itself, they do have different sort of like changes in their attitude itself. But whenever we do talk of these basic aspects, most of the time these host country government do have the objective of maximizing their foreign exchanges, right? So what they do, they restrict their outflow, right? And they increase their inflows in terms of the exchanges. In the process, what it happens? They impose restrictions on the profit margin. They impose restrictions on the royalties. They impose restrictions on the dividends, or sometimes these restrictions are also imposed in the repatriation process, right? So achieving the basic economic objective of growth and development, the organizations or the government, right, does have the objective of increasing their foreign exchanges, right, and thereby accomplish the objectives. But immense is truly something else. So how can we manage all of those kind of things? That is what we need to consider itself. Monetary and fiscal policies, second, right? Monetary and fiscal policies of this host country and the MNCs, they do vary significantly. Where would you talk of, like, let's say, for example, right, in case of inflation, like, inflammatory situation itself, we can say inflations. So what will be the approach of the government itself? Government would increase the interest rate of the banks, right? Now this interest rate of the banks, just to stop this money flow, right? So that will lead to the higher cost of production, and if we do have higher cost of production, that will lead to, because of this higher cost of capital also, the profitability aspect of the organization can be downtrend. What these MNCs don't like to have, don't like to compromise with the profit part itself, right? So government, from time to time, they impose certain ceilings, like on the borrowing amount itself, reducing the money flow, right? Sometimes government, does that through a systematic, monetary policy itself. So all of those, you know, monetary and fiscal policies of the government are to be understood and to be dealt carefully. Hmm? At times also, you know, local governments do impose, right, the taxes. As I said, no, most of the time, because of this economies of scales or higher level of production, lower cost of production, always these MNCs do have a threat on the local uh, entrepreneurs. So, just to protect the interest of the local entrepreneurs, like government from time to time impose certain taxes, certain duties, levies on the imported products itself. Yeah. And when we do have those kind of taxes or things have been imposed on these MNCs, the profitability aspect of the MNCs goes down, right? So that is what we need to make it. Economic development and industrial policies itself, right? Most of the time, like this government of the host country would like to develop certain areas for their own economic benefit, right? Now, these remote areas are are being developed as a part of the entire process. So one of the things that we need to understand is that the basic infrastructural facilities which are available for those MNCs is what that we need to evaluate. So it is anyhow we have to go by the implications or go by the objectives of the host country government itself. That's what, right? We do talk of the other challenge that I do have. Sometimes to protect the local entrepreneurs, right? Government provides subsidiaries, right? Government provides certain monetary and fiscal benefits to these domestic SMCs, small and medium enterprises, right? So whenever we do talk of this, because of the incentive, because of the incentive being added by the government itself, right? So these domestic firms are equipped with competing structure of the MNCs, but again, sometimes this MNCs are also restricted for entering into a new market niche, entering into a new market segment itself, where the government of those host countries can restrict an access to that, right? So sometimes whenever we are going for a joint venture kind of thing, right? Say to protect their local entrepreneurs, government do not provide sales and promotional support, sales and market support, marketing support to these MNCs. Only the benefit is given to the domestic level of players itself, right? Continuing with that, just a minute. We do have, at times also, because of security reasons, the host country government do not allow these MNCs to have their operations in particular area. These are the risks that may be associated with the organization, so we need to have a careful evaluation of all of those kind of risks. Sometimes we do say this colonial heritage, as we understand that, right? Uh, all those nations, all those countries which were under the colonial rule, they witnessed the strong dominance of these colonial rulers. This colonial dominance is what that has led these organizations to develop some negative attitude towards these MNCs. So whether it is again a factor, no, that is to be considered. So whether a particular host country has already been under the colonial rule or not, that has to be evaluated with different sort of factors. And finally, we do talk of socio-cultural differences, right? And these socio-cultural differences are key to the success or failure of any of this internationalization process. Right? What is required is you need to have a depth study of the societal and cultural dimensions of the host country itself. Societal and cultural dimensions of the host country. And to have the way we need to understand the behavioral norms, the way we should greet others in the host country, the way we should shake hand with others in the host country, the way we go for a exchange of gifts in the host country, the way the hospitality is taken care of. Okay? All of those factors do need to be evaluated before we move to the internationalization process itself. Right? However, there are certain circumstantial causes of this political risk itself. Circumstantial causes, like sometimes you do have these political opponents having different policies. Like we do talk of different political parties driven by different policies. So one policy, like one of the policies of the political party which is in favor of the MNC may not be promoted by the other one, right? So there is always a threat. If the government changes, then there is a threat that the policies may also change. Okay? Sometimes these oppositions do carry out a reversal of the decision taken by the predecessor. Right? So all of those kind of things. You're thinking of this economic policies itself, as if we say that a particular political party, they are influenced by certain ideologies, certain philosophies. Right? When there is a change in terms of the government itself, so those ideologies and philosophies do change. Sometimes we do say that like we are talking of capitalistic structure of our economy to the socialistic structure of our economy. It's a complete different ideology that we need to take into consideration. Okay? So any such kind of decision which may be a favorable one for the MNCs, right, may not be promoted by the other political party. May the decision be in a different way altogether. Right? So what is required? Or the particular government may have a hostile approach to the MNC itself. Right? We are talking of all of these is leading towards this economic and social instabilities itself, right? So sometimes you do come out with the adverse political activity like oppositions do have, right? So what it says, the basic role of the opposition is to criticize the government itself. Right. So any such policy, trade policy, which is in favor of those MNCs are a subject of those criticism by the oppositions. Right? So how can we manage all of those things? And sometimes it goes beyond that also. It goes beyond the socio-economic policies itself. Right? Like most of the time, they do come out with issues like environmental pollution, issues like safety in the manufacturing process, safety standards, right? Or some or other violation of Forest Act, violation of the protections against industrial or say endangered species in that particular industrial area. Right? All of those kind of issues, extra issues, right, should be raised by or can be raised by this opposition parties and puts a threat. Beyond that, the most important thing is that what sort of relationship, what sort of bilateral ties are there between the host country government and the parent country government itself. Host country government to parent country government. That is what that defines the entire process. Okay, and we come out with the local vested interests sometimes, right? There may be adverse actions by this local people having a vested interest, right? Like as I said, there is a threat. This MNCs do put a threat on the local organizations, right? In terms of putting them in a competitive scenario. So sometimes you'll see that this competition leads to development of the organization. It's okay, right? So at times you'll see that these competitions, the organizations do accept these competitions, and then they accept those kind of changes, they compete. But if those organizations which do not accept this kind of change, right, what they do, they put an impact or pressurize the local governments to have a favorable condition in with them itself. So those kind of things are temporary, but putting an influence on the organizations itself, right? So how can we manage the risk associated with the internationalization process or with the threat itself? This MNCs, when they evaluate that their like potential uncertainties are much higher than the returns, they can simply reject the investments in that, right? So they do disagree the terms and conditions with the host government itself, but at times this host government need to relax in the terms and conditions so that MNCs can have a better operational efficiency over there. To minimize the risk, this MNC should go for a long-term agreement. So this, agreements with safest terms and conditions may not be affected with the instabilities in the political scenario if they go for a very long-term agreements, right? So it will be very difficult for the local, political parties to come out with their notion of interpreting these agreements itself. Right? Sometimes we are going for lobbying process itself. Lobbying can be done in a direct way or in an indirect way. Direct way of lobbying says that MNCs can have their own offices at the headquarters itself, right? And they do establish these liaisoning officers to deal with the political party leaders and local officials itself. But in an indirect way, they can also influence, right? But whatever it may be, lobbying through buying or bribing is an unethical practice, but at times organizations need to do that also, right? Legal actions, like as I said, no, strong binding will end up with this particular legal actions against the government itself, where the country's legal system is very strong, right? Or when all of these things don't work, then there may be a pressure from the home country in terms of the bilateral relationships, right? So these are the ways through which these organizations can evaluate the risk and tackle the risk at their own level, right? So let us end up over here, and once again we'll meet tomorrow to continue with the further aspects of internationalization process. So thank you very much. Have a good day.